Sometimes I wonder if there's a specific moment when everything starts to fall apart, or if it's more like water slowly wearing away at stone, so gradual you don't notice until there's nothing left but dust. I'm Addison Becker, and I'm sitting in my cramped studio apartment in Denver, surrounded by boxes I still haven't unpacked after 8 months, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I met Cameron at a friend's birthday party at this trendy rooftop bar downtown. It was one of those perfect September evenings when the city lights were just starting to twinkle and everyone was laughing a little too loud from the wine. I was 28, working as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit, and honestly feeling pretty good about myself. I'd just gotten a small promotion, had my own apartment, and was finally starting to feel like a real adult. Cameron wasn't the type I usually went for. Most of my ex-boyfriends were these creative, slightly chaotic guys, musicians, freelance photographers, the kind who kept irregular hours and had strong opinions about obscure bands. Cameron was different. He managed a sporting goods store, had been there for 4 years, and talked about wanting to open his own place someday. He was steady in a way that felt refreshing after years of dating guys who couldn't commit to weekend plans, let alone a relationship. What drew me to him wasn't just his stability, though. Cameron had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. When I told him about my work helping coordinate fundraising events for homeless youth, he asked thoughtful questions about the challenges, about what made me passionate about it. He didn't try to one-up me with his own stories or change the subject to something about himself. He just listened. Our first real date was at this little Italian place he'd heard about but never tried. Nothing fancy, but he'd made reservations, showed up exactly on time, and had actually looked up the menu beforehand so he could recommend things. It sounds small, but after years of guys who suggested meeting up somewhere and then spent 20 minutes deciding where to go, this felt revolutionary. The early months were easy in a way I'd never experienced before. Cameron didn't play games. If he said he'd call, he called. If we made plans, he showed up. When I had to work late on a big fundraising gala, he brought me dinner without me asking. When my car broke down, he didn't just offer to help. He actually researched mechanics in my area and came with me to make sure I didn't get ripped off. My friends were initially skeptical. They'd grown used to hearing about my relationship drama, the back and forth texting, the analyzing of every interaction. With Cameron, there wasn't much to analyze. He was straightforward, consistent, kind. My best friend Rachel said it sounded almost too easy, and I laughed it off. But part of me wondered if she was right. Shouldn't love be more complicated than this? But there was something deeply comforting about knowing where I stood with him. Cameron didn't make me guess his feelings or wonder if he was seeing other people. When he said he loved me for the first time, 6 months in, during a quiet Sunday morning making pancakes in his kitchen, it felt natural, like something we'd been building toward all along. We moved in together after a year, and it was surprisingly seamless. We had similar standards of cleanliness, compatible morning routines, and even liked the same shows. Cameron was thoughtful about small things. He'd pick up my favorite yogurt at the store, remember that I preferred the bedroom slightly cooler at night, and never hogged the bathroom during my getting ready routine. The proposal came on our 2nd anniversary, nothing elaborate. He'd planned a hike to this overlook we'd discovered together, and when we reached the top, he simply said, "I love our life together, and I want to keep building it with you." The ring was perfect, not flashy, but exactly my style, and I said yes without hesitation. Planning the wedding was when I first started noticing things that should have been warning signs. Cameron was enthusiastic about the practical aspects, budget, venue capacity, logistics, but seemed less interested in the romantic details. When I showed him inspiration photos for centerpieces or discussed the ceremony music, he'd nod supportively, but didn't really engage. At the time, I told myself he was just being typically male about wedding planning, letting me have creative control while he handled the business side. Looking back, though, I think we were already approaching our relationship from different angles. For Cameron, the wedding was a celebration of the life we were already building together. For me, It was becoming a fantasy about the life I hoped we'd have. Something more exciting, more romantic, more like the relationships I saw in movies or on social media. The first year of marriage was fine, good even. We settled into routines that worked for both of us. Cameron got a promotion, and I was doing well at the nonprofit, getting more responsibility with major donor relations. We bought a house, a modest 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, and spent weekends painting rooms and learning how to maintain a yard. But somewhere around month 18, I started feeling restless. Not because anything was wrong exactly, but because everything felt so predictable. Cameron would come home from work, ask about my day, help make dinner, and we'd watch Netflix until bedtime. Weekends were spent running errands, visiting his parents, or working on house projects. It was comfortable, but I began to wonder if comfortable was enough. My job started feeling routine too. The initial excitement of helping organize major fundraising events had worn off, and I was mostly doing administrative work, following up with donors, scheduling meetings, updating databases. I found myself scrolling through LinkedIn during lunch breaks, looking at jobs in other cities, wondering what it would be like to start fresh somewhere new. Cameron seemed perfectly content with our life. He'd talk enthusiastically about his plans for the store, about wanting to start looking at houses in better school districts for the future, about the vacation fund he was building up so we could take a nice trip for our 5th anniversary. His contentment started to irritate me in ways I couldn't fully explain. I began spending more time with my college friend Monica, who had moved to Denver for her job. Monica was everything I felt like I wasn't anymore. Spontaneous, adventurous, always trying new restaurants or planning weekend trips to mountain towns I'd never heard of. She was single by choice, had a gorgeous apartment downtown, and seemed to be living this vibrant life full of possibilities. Our friendship became my escape valve. While Cameron spent his evenings researching business loans and watching sports, I'd meet Monica for happy hour, trying new cocktail bars and complaining about how boring my life had become. She'd show me photos from her latest weekend adventure, rock climbing in Moab, or a spontaneous road trip to Santa Fe, and I'd feel this sharp pang of envy mixed with regret. "You're so young," she'd say, when I'd express frustration about my marriage. "You could be doing anything, going anywhere. Instead, you're playing house in the suburbs with someone who thinks excitement is trying a new brand of frozen pizza." I started to see Cameron through Monica's eyes, as safe but uninspiring, reliable but dull. When he'd suggest we try that new Mediterranean place downtown, I'd think about how Monica and her friends would probably find some hole-in-the-wall spot with amazing food and terrible ambiance. Something with a story. When Cameron planned our anniversary dinner at the same upscale restaurant where he'd proposed, I felt disappointed rather than romantic. Everything came to a head at Cameron's 32nd birthday party. He'd wanted something low-key, just close friends and family at our house, maybe order some pizza and play board games. But his sister insisted on throwing him a proper party, renting space at this wine bar and inviting what felt like half the city. I'd had several glasses of wine by the time his sister started giving this toast about what a wonderful couple we were, how lucky I was to have found such a good man, how they all looked forward to watching us build our family together. Everyone was nodding and smiling, and Cameron was beaming at me with this look of pure adoration that suddenly felt suffocating. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was seeing Monica across the room looking effortlessly chic, while I felt like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But when Cameron's sister finished her toast and everyone raised their glasses, I heard myself say, well, sometimes I joke that marrying him was my biggest regret. The silence was immediate and complete. I kept going, my voice getting louder as if volume could somehow make it funnier. I mean, think about all the adventures I could be having right now if I weren't tied down to someone whose idea of excitement is comparing prices on lawnmowers. Cameron's face went completely pale. His sister looked like I'd slapped her. Even Monica was staring at me with something like horror. But I couldn't stop talking, couldn't seem to pull back from the edge I'd thrown myself over. "Don't look at me like that," I said to the room full of shocked faces. "Everyone thinks it sometimes, right? Like, What if you'd made different choices? What if you'd prioritized your own dreams instead of settling for the first stable thing that came along? Cameron set down his wine glass very carefully and walked outside. His best friend followed him, and I could see them through the window having what looked like an intense conversation. I tried to laugh it off, telling everyone I was obviously kidding, that they all knew how much I loved Cameron. That wine just made me philosophical. People started leaving early, giving me polite hugs and Cameron awkward shoulder pats. His family left without saying goodbye to me. Monica drove me home because Cameron had gotten a ride with his friend, and the whole way she kept saying, "Addison, what the hell was that?" When Cameron finally came home around midnight, I was lying in bed pretending to be asleep. I could hear him moving around the house, cleaning up from the party I'd ruined. He slept in the guest room that night without saying a word. The next morning, I tried to apologize, but Cameron just looked at me with these tired eyes and asked, "Did you mean it?" I could have lied. I should have lied. Instead, I found myself telling him everything, how bored I'd become, how trapped I felt, how I wondered constantly about the life I might have had if I'd been braver, more adventurous, less willing to settle. The words poured out like I'd been holding them back for years, which I guess I had. Cameron listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally like he was confirming something he'd already suspected. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time before saying, "I wish you'd told me how you felt before you told everyone else." What followed was the most painful month of my life. Cameron didn't get angry, which somehow made it worse. He just became politely distant, like a roommate who was planning to move out but hadn't found a new place yet. He slept in the guest room, made his own meals, and stopped asking about my day. I threw myself into spending time with Monica, staying out later, coming home to find Cameron already asleep. I updated my social media constantly, posting photos from new restaurants and bars, trying to prove to myself and everyone else that I was living the exciting life I'd been craving. But the excitement felt hollow. When Monica and I went salsa dancing downtown, I kept thinking about how Cameron would have gamely tried to learn the steps, even though dancing wasn't his thing. When we took a spontaneous weekend trip to Aspen, I found myself wishing I had someone to share the beautiful scenery with, someone who would remember the details and bring it up months later. Meanwhile, Cameron started going to therapy. He didn't tell me directly. I found out when I saw the appointment confirmations in his email, when he asked me to print something for him. Part of me was offended that he was discussing our marriage with a stranger. Another part of me was jealous that he was doing something proactive, while I was just running away from our problems. The conversation that ended our marriage happened on a Wednesday evening in October. I'd come home from another dinner with Monica, slightly buzzed and feeling defensive before Cameron even said anything. But he wasn't angry when I walked in. He was sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of tea, and he looked up at me with something like relief. "I've been thinking about what you said at my birthday party," he began. "And I realize you were right about something. You did settle, but so did I." That stopped me cold. In all our fights and tense conversations over the past month, Cameron had never suggested that our marriage was anything less than what he wanted. "I settled for someone who didn't really want to be with me," he continued. "I convinced myself that your restlessness was just a phase, that if I was patient and loving enough, you'd eventually appreciate what we had together. But you can't love someone into loving you back." I tried to protest, to say that I did love him, but the words felt empty even as I said them. Cameron just nodded sadly. "You love the security I provide, and the way I make your life easier, and maybe even some things about me as a person. But you don't love being married to me. You haven't for a long time." He was right, and we both knew it. What I'd felt for Cameron was gratitude, comfort, and fondness, but not the deep, abiding love that sustains a marriage through difficult times. I'd been going through the motions, hoping the feelings would return or that the practical benefits would be enough. Cameron moved out the following week, staying with his sister while we figured out the logistics. We agreed to try mediation instead of lawyers, one last gesture of respect for what we'd once meant to each other. The process was surprisingly amicable. We didn't have children or significant assets to fight over, and neither of us wanted to hurt the other more than we already had. The hardest part was telling our families. My parents were devastated, having genuinely loved Cameron and assumed we'd eventually give them grandchildren. His family was polite but cool when I called to apologize, and I couldn't blame them. I'd humiliated their son in front of everyone they cared about. Monica was supportive in the way single friends are when married friends get divorced, enthusiastic about my newfound freedom, full of plans for girls' trips and dating adventures. But I felt exhausted by the prospect of starting over, of rebuilding my life from scratch at 31. That was 8 months ago. Cameron and I finalized our divorce just before Christmas, and he's been dating someone new for the past few months. Meanwhile, I'm learning that the single life I'd idealized isn't quite what I expected. Dating in your 30s is complicated in ways I'd forgotten. Most of the interesting men my age are already taken, and the ones who aren't often have good reasons for still being single. I've gone on dates with guys who were exciting but unreliable, adventurous but selfish, passionate but ultimately unavailable. The job market has been rough too. I left the nonprofit after the divorce, partly because the constant reminders of my old life were depressing, and partly because I wanted to finally pursue something more exciting. But exciting jobs often pay less and require more networking than I anticipated. I'm currently working as a freelance event planner, which sounds glamorous, but mostly involves dealing with bridezillas and corporate managers who change their minds constantly. The loneliness is the part no one warns you about. Not just the absence of a romantic partner, but the loss of being known by someone. Cameron knew that I got cranky when I was hungry, that I liked my coffee slightly burnt, that I always checked the locks twice before bed. He knew my work stories and my family drama and could make me laugh when I was taking myself too seriously. Monica is a good friend, but she's building her own life, and I'm increasingly aware that my constant need for distraction and validation is becoming exhausting for her. Other friends from my married life have naturally drifted away, not out of malice, but because their lives are full of the same domestic concerns that I'd found so suffocating. I've started therapy, partly to deal with the depression that followed the divorce, and partly to figure out what I actually want from life. My therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, keeps pushing me to examine why I equated stability with boredom, why I needed constant external validation to feel valuable, why I sabotaged a relationship with someone who genuinely cared about me. "It sounds like you were looking for Cameron to make your life exciting," she said during one session, "instead of taking responsibility for creating your own sense of purpose and adventure." She wasn't wrong. I'd expected marriage to transform me into someone more interesting, more fulfilled, more worthy of the life I thought I deserved. When that didn't happen automatically, I blamed Cameron for not being exciting enough, rather than examining why I felt so empty. The hardest truth I've had to face is that Cameron wasn't the problem. He was exactly who he'd always been: kind, reliable, genuinely interested in building a life with someone he loved. I was the one who changed, who decided that those qualities weren't enough, who wanted him to be someone he never claimed to be. I think about the night I ruined his birthday party, and I'm horrified by my own cruelty. I took someone who loved me unconditionally and humiliated him in front of everyone he cared about, all because I was too cowardly to have an honest conversation about my feelings. I blamed him for my own dissatisfaction with life, as if he was responsible for making me feel fulfilled and adventurous. The irony is that some of my happiest memories from our marriage were the quiet moments I'd learned to dismiss as boring. Sunday mornings reading different sections of the newspaper and sharing interesting articles, working together in our garden, planning what to plant each season. The way Cameron would listen to my work problems and offer thoughtful advice without trying to fix everything for me. I'd been so focused on what our life together wasn't, spontaneous, passionate, Instagram-worthy, that I'd lost sight of what it was: steady, supportive, built on genuine care and respect. I'd confused drama with depth, excitement with meaning. I'm trying to build a different kind of life now, one that doesn't depend on other people to make me feel interesting or worthwhile. I've started hiking alone, something I'd never done when I was married because it seemed too quiet, too slow. Now I appreciate the solitude, the chance to think without distractions. I'm also volunteering again, this time with a literacy program for adults. It's not glamorous work, but it feels meaningful in a way that my constant search for excitement never did. There's something deeply satisfying about helping someone learn to read their first novel or write a letter to their children. Dr. Rodriguez says I'm making progress, learning to sit with discomfort instead of always needing to escape it. She thinks my restlessness in the marriage was partly about avoiding deeper questions about who I wanted to be, what kind of contribution I wanted to make to the world. It's easier to blame a boring husband than to do the hard work of creating a meaningful life, she told me recently. And I knew she was right. If I could go back and talk to the woman who stood up at that birthday party and destroyed her marriage for a few minutes of attention, I don't know if she would listen. She was so convinced that she deserved more excitement, more adventure, more recognition for the sacrifice she thought she was making by being married. I would tell her that marriage isn't a prison sentence. It's a foundation you build together, and you can construct whatever kind of life you want on top of it. Cameron would have supported my dreams of travel, of career changes, of new adventures. He just wanted to be included, to build something together instead of watching me run towards something he couldn't see. I would tell her that the grass isn't greener on the other side. It just looks that way from a distance. That excitement fades, but kindness endures. That being known and loved for who you really are is rarer and more valuable than passion that burns bright and burns out. Most of all, I would tell her to have the conversation, to be honest about her feelings before they turned into resentment, to work together on solutions instead of building walls. Cameron deserved a wife who could appreciate what he offered and communicate what she needed. I failed him in both respects. I don't know if Cameron and I could have made it work, even if I'd handled things differently. Maybe we were fundamentally incompatible. Maybe I would have eventually felt trapped no matter how understanding he was. But I'll never know because I didn't give us a real chance. I chose the nuclear option instead of doing the hard work of honest communication and compromise. I didn't just joke that marrying Cameron was my biggest regret. It became true, but not for the reasons I thought. My biggest regret isn't that I married him. It's that I threw away a good man who loved me because I was too immature to understand what I had, too selfish to appreciate his quiet devotion, too afraid of my own mediocrity to stop blaming him for it. Cameron deserved better than me, and I'm glad he found it with Jessica. I hope she never takes for granted the way he listens when she talks, the way he remembers small details about her preferences, the way he shows love through consistent actions rather than grand gestures. As for me, I'm learning to live with the consequences of my choices. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some words can't be taken back. Some people can't be won back once you've shown them how little you valued what they gave you. The best I can do now is try to become the kind of person who would deserve someone like Cameron, even though that ship has sailed. Maybe that's growing up, not getting everything you think you want, but learning to recognize what actually matters before it's too late. I'm 32 now, living alone in a studio apartment, starting over in ways I never expected. It's not the adventure I thought I wanted, but it's the one I chose. Now I have to make the best of it and try to do better next time, if there is a next time. Some lessons come too late to save what you've lost, but just in time to save what's left of yourself.